Hey guys, welcome to this week's webcast. Today we're going to be talking about connective tissue. And just to give a quick loose definition before I get started, connective tissue is going to be tissue that supports, binds, separates, or connects other tissue. So it plays a real supporting role. There's going to be three unique characteristics about this tissue. Characteristics. First one is going to be that there are relatively few cells in this tissue, and that there is a lot of extracellular matrix, or ECM. And that is contrasting to what we talked about with epithelium, where the tissue is mostly cells. Second one is that the ECM, or extracellular matrix, is going to be made up of ground substance, and fibers. Ground substance and fibers. Third unique characteristic is that it's derived or has embryonic origin. And the embryonic tissue, that embryonic tissue is called mesenchyme. There are four types of connective tissue. It's going to be connective tissue proper, if we're using it as an example in this webcast for the most part, cartilage, bone, and blood. Alright, now I'm going to hop back here to this extracellular matrix. And I talked about how it's created of ground substance and fibers. Those fibers, there's three types of fibers. Three fibers. The first is collagen. And what this does is provide high tensile strength for the tissue. So it's going to help keep the tissue in the correct shape and resist pulling forces. Second one is elastic fibers. As you can imagine, these fibers are characterized by their elasticity, and they have good rebound and springiness. And what this would do is let the tissue have some give until it reaches a certain point in which collagen would take over it and stop the tissue from moving. And the third type are reticular fibers. And these are really delicate fibers that they form sort of a net around other types of cells that are in the connective tissue. So if you have a blood vessel coming into the cell, these fibers are going to form a net around those capillary beds or those blood vessels in order to keep it in place inside the connective tissue. And you can kind of remember that by this RET is similar to NET, which is net. So that's how I would remember that one. And these are in a specific order in this case, where you have increasing size as you move up the list. So these collagen fibers are the thickest of the three, then come elastic, and then reticular fibers. And then the other part of that extracellular matrix, which is most of what the tissue is ground substance. And this is essentially the filler of the tissue. So everything whereas you don't have a whole lot of cells, and the fibers are not incredibly thick, the rest of the area is going to be taken up by this ground substance, and it's this gelatinous filler. So I'm just going to write filler right here. So a couple other characteristics of connective tissue that you should be able to recognize. The first is that it is vascularized. Connective tissue is vascularized. Vascularized. Excuse the spelling, please. And that's also in contrast to what we talked about with epithelium, where it's avascular. And that's not all connective tissue. So this is connective tissue proper we're talking about, is vascularized. Cartilage up here is avascular, which is one reason why things like knee injuries take so long to heal. Second one is that connective tissue is innervated. Innervated. And that's similar to epithelium, whereas you have nerve fibers coming in. Connective tissue also has specialized cells that secrete protein subunits to form these fibers, or form the bone, or form the cartilage. So these specialized cells are going to be fibroblasts. First one is fibroblasts. Osteoblasts. And chondrocytes. And each one of these is specific to a certain type of connective tissue. Chondrocytes. And you can tell by their name. So you have fibroblasts here, or fibers. You have osteoblasts, or osteo for bone, and then chondroblasts for cartilage. And like I said, these secrete protein subunits that actually create these fibers and these building blocks outside of the cell. And so what I mean by that is that, and why it's important to point out, is that for the most part, everything's constructed within cells and secreted from the cells. In this case, what you have is, we'll draw a fibroblast here. See if I can keep it within the space. And instead of the fiber being woven inside here and then secreted, what it does is secretes protein subunits and builds it outside on the fibroblast. So you'd have a collagen fiber coming here. And the subunits are being made in here and then secreted out in order to create this collagen fiber. And the same thing happens with elastic fibers and reticular fibers. And so you'd have this thinner elastic fiber here being woven as well, or created, I shouldn't say woven. And also reticular fibers, which I said are rather small. So we'll draw those small in net-like fashion. All these fibers are being created outside of the cell, which makes this somewhat unique. As far as what else is made up in connective tissue, you're going to have, let's see, other cells. I already mentioned it was vascularized, so you'll have blood vessels or capillary beds. Nerve fibers. Nerve fibers are going to be found within connective tissue. You'll have fat cells for energy storage and energy usage. And then you also have immune cells. And these immune cells are pretty important because they're the first line of defense against some sort of bacterial or any other sort of infection that you might get, say, if you scratch your arm or cut up your face. It's important that you don't want to start a systemic immune response if you can just block it right at the site. And so that's going to be our webcast for this week. I have a supplemental video as well that talks more about these fibers and other cells, and that one's not required, but it will help clarify some things as far as the size goes. Thanks.